That boy.
Just.
Testing.
Dismiss. Yes, this is. Okay, just.
Put it off and walk around the office, left it right on the desk. Yep. I don't think I did the agenda.
Yeah, I was right. Okay.
Okay, that's that.
Get that out of.
Well, I meant good timing for her and the baby and just
Old thing.
now 4 weeks. So she had been, blob baby for the first 3 weeks, but we just entered like the fussy stage and all that. So I was able to do that. Yep.
Oh, how is the family?
That was good.
Tell everybody I said hi.
I did.
Okay.
What's Jenny doing?
Janie is doing, oh, I have to talk to you after the meeting. But I can't call Janie. Thank you for asking.
Yes,
When's the next record coming?
I don't know. I'm not one of those. Try to read between the lines and all the code. It's been more than 10 months.
No, no.
I use this to highlight certain stuff.
Oh, okay. I figured that's what it was.
Yeah,
Get it back home.
yeah, that's really awesome.
Can you blame him?
Hmm.
That's right. I go to Europe last summer to go see.
Yeah.
Germany.
Yeah,
Try
I
to
hear
see her in
that.
America.
We got the
We can start, I was looking for,
lottery.
did everyone receive the email with Phil's comments on the draft? Okay, cool. I didn't print that, I thought it was attached to this, my apologies. I can print it up now, at this printer, if we all need it.
Yeah, here.
Okay, cool. Then you can start, sir.
Okay, I'll call to order the meeting of the PAC Policy Subcommittee. Welcome everybody here. We typically work fairly informally, and so we're happy to make it an open conversation with people on the committee, people on the committee and on PAC, and other people who want to participate. So Kathleen, for
If anyone
example,
come on.
you're welcome to
Come on.
participate. The caveat being that we do reserve the right to limit it to committee members if there's something time pressing for the situation warrants it, but generally speaking, we like to make this an open conversation. The more voices, the better. Is there anybody at home? Anybody on Zoom?
Look like one.
That's
That's us.
That's
Turn
us.
the camera around. I purposely sit this way so I'm not facing the camera. I'm facing the camera. Tricked me.
I can't see.
That's okay.
It's fine, Angela.
You sure? 'Cause I
No, I'm joking.
I don't know that we published a formal agenda, although there was a narrative description of the agenda, and I believe the only thing on our agenda today is to review the draft ordinance for the Langley plan.
Yeah, the agenda is essentially that with this attached.
It was, I guess, put out for comment at the last HAC meeting, and we did receive some comments from Phil, which I tried to categorize them, and I tend to go through those, but don't let that be the only thing on the agenda. Or don't.
Wouldn't worry, the actual idea was, I was gonna make comments and then we were gonna run our mouths after I made the comments.
Is that what, that's-
Yeah.
Okay, Phil made comments, and now we're running our mouth.
Right.
Dan,
Portion.
before you get into it, there is something I wanna to say to the group here. Alright, so I just wanna say to the group that staff, speaking on behalf of staff, we really do appreciate your time, your expertise, and your background, your respectful organizations you represent. To my knowledge, in terms of how staff conducts itself, I am not aware of any staff member ever making any open disparaging comments about anyone of this committee in name or in organization. Yet there are acknowledgements and complaints circulating internally about disparaging comments, profanity, name calling towards staff, city staff, and HAC in general.
From the hack?
Not from the HAC,
Oh,
but just in general. I'm speaking very generally. I
Right,
don't wanna
right.
point fingers at
Some members
anybody.
of the HAC making disparaging comments
Right.
about staff members.
We are,
I'm speaking very general. Okay?
but you're saying
I'm
the
saying, I'm
Right.
saying that it's been brought to attention that staff does not appreciate when there are directed disparaging comments. In fact,
duly noted.
it was kind of aired today, without getting into the details. But just for the record, like, let's just be cognizant of that. If we can maintain a form
Michael,
of respect, that would be appreciated.
that is
Yeah.
really
duly,
embarrassing.
Right?
yeah.
So we are, this work is very nuanced, complex on our behalf, and we have internal and external pressures that we are navigating through. And trust me when I tell you, particularly for the housing team and OCS in general, I'll say, everyone's doing the best with what they have. So,
Well, I'll follow up with a little bit of an editorial. I think we have the best staff, the most responsive staff we've ever had, and
I agree with that. Certainly.
I would suggest that that you bring this up in closed session with the chair and the vice chair. And if there's an opportunity for people to be addressed directly, but discreetly, I think that would be a good thing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Because we all represent each other
Exactly,
in this
exactly.
board.
Sunshine and Joy, you okay with that meeting with?
I'm
closed
okay.
session?
Please schedule the meeting.
Will do, thank you. So on to the work for the day, looking at the land bank ordinance, just a little bit of a recap. This is been a multi-year process to get to something like a draft ordinance. A lot of it was short-circuited by COVID. So there had been a lot of interest and momentum around it, then COVID happened, and obviously as a city, we were reduced down to doing the sort of bare essentials to move forward, so things like this couldn't move forward. Also, the city undertook a really revolutionary and hugely highly ranging update to the zoning ordinance, and so this got put a little bit on the back burner. It's now back on the front burner. My understanding is that HAC agreed on we came back together as a group as this body was reconstituted, agreed on a proposal or a draft ordinance to go forward. And then independent counsel that was, and if I'm getting into this wrong, let me know.
No, go ahead.
Independent counsel who looked at it on behalf of the city, rewrote it, I think with the intent of keeping it predominantly the same, but also making sure that it's in compliance with enabling the legislation. What did I miss about that?
Nothing missed, just to frame it more correctly for context, that the reviewing attorney didn't assemble the ordinance. That was done a collection of them sending us pieces of ordinance from Chesapeake, for example. The city attorneys also directing us to language that's in the development land bank authorities act that we had to include. But in terms of assembling the draft that went to the city attorney who reviewed it in whole, we put it all together.
Okay.
And things that are included in here are responsive to all of those communications, meetings, directions that staff receive.
That's good to know. That actually, I think, will help with this conversation, because if there's something that is different than what had been in the ordinance recommendation that we put forward before, it sounds like you can speak on behalf of the city for why that change was made. Is that-
As much as I possibly can, and just, so it could be a considerable amount of the ordinance that you may find in that light, because essentially, as it's been pointed out, what was mostly carried over is board structure and governance in terms of your hack draft of the ordinance.
Okay, so maybe the way to start, Antoine, rather than us taking it and kind of picking it apart.
Sure.
Would you like the floor for a little bit to talk about the evolution and so, I don't mean every single word, but some of the bigger concepts that have evolved and why?
Okay, I'll go over it in high level, just addressing each section. And then you all, if you have a question you want to delve into a little deeper, we can do that. So the first section you see out the gate was definitions. We were flagged by that in terms of an intention for staff to make sure we incorporate, because it was apparent in a few draft ordinances from other localities, but also attorneys had questioned about things that weren't defined that we should define. So that list grew. So,
That was important, I thought.
okay.
Then
I think it's been like a welcome addition.
Yeah, so maybe I can pause. Is there anybody who has any questions about the either the list of definitions, what's included, or how the terms are defined? Or can we just move on from that?
Not at first glance, and we would expect that in a final draft anyway, to define what you're gonna talk about.
Okay, so we can kind of bank that and say we're not gonna, let's take that off the table as something we need to talk about.
So are there any additional paper copies? Just so I can-
Okay, so sorry to interrupt.
Nope.
Trying to bank as much as.
Oh, that's a good boss. So very few words were taken out. I think sometimes there was one instance where another definition explained something else and it kind of got merged under one term. I can't remember which one it was, so we'll have to go back and look at it. Then the next section you all have, and they're currently unnumbered because it's not, the chapter or article is not numbered until adoption. So to follow along with me, is authority. As much as possible, this language is pretty much carbon copy out of the Land Bank Entities Act. Not much more to add there. Formation and purpose. This was something also that was common. We saw that section in the Chesapeake model. Only section that you all don't see that was not, it was present in their formation document, but not in their ordinance, was like vision, mission, core values, and affordable housing priority tiers. Now where that, I've moved on to the next section, by the way, I'm sorry. So where this is being responsive to is communication and meetings about, well, where do we guide or set a starting point for this stuff? Whether it be in the ordinance as a regulation or policy preference, or whether we leave it up to post creation and then the board creates it. But then there was a viewpoint of, well, if this is, I gotta back up one important step. One of the primary reasons discussed for switching to Land Bank Authority, as it was noted to here in some pre-discussion, was that essentially to keep it to have a little bit more oversight and direct involvement. And then also, since staff was going to be involved to some point anyway, that it felt like, well, we should be guiding this discussion at the onset versus afterwards, so that council can be presented with our, at least conceptually, what vision, mission, values, and what have you of this entity is. It is meant to be responsive to the affordable housing plan. Specifically, we were being asked by executive leadership and team about, well, how does this authority prioritize projects or prioritize the AMIs? And if you read it aligned with the affordable housing plan, the high priority really aligns with where we are spending most of our money and effort and focus and policy attention. moderate priority, sort of that middle range, and then standard priority, 51 to 80%. Now, there was some conversation about why the range from 31 to 50, and internally, just based on reports that we've gotten back from projects, we have found that development isn't happening like specific amount of 30% AMI, specific amount of 50%. Really, portfolios, performers have a range because they have to make that performer work. So that's why it's not expressly written like it is in the affordable housing plan. We're trying to capture a range where folks are already kind of operating within, and it might not do it justice here. So there's room for recommendation, but that's why it looks like the affordable housing plan, but not exactly copied verbatim.
Can I suggest that maybe we take a pause and talk about those 4 sections that you just went over now, so that your words are fresh in our minds?
Absolutely.
So, I think there's probably gonna be some discussion about some of these things. One is the change from it being a nonprofit, non-stock corporation to an authority. Phil, you wrote about that. Do you want to introduce or talk about that? We'll open up that.
Right, so-
conversation.
Right, so, I mean, and when this was first presented to the HAC back last October, there wasn't unanimity. I mean, this was a decision made by city management. There wasn't unanimity of agreement in that amongst the HAC, that this was the right way to go. The explanation given to that left out first was that the city wanted more oversight in general because it would involve first, tax revenue, and second, whatever funding that the city directly provided to it. And I personally don't find that a sufficient reason in and of itself, but not to get bogged down in that. Subsequent HAC discussions, if you'll recall, is, all right, if we're gonna do this as an authority, and we've used the word pilot program, then we need to sunset the authority and have in parallel formed at the same time, which will cost us $100, a Virginia non-stock corporation that will have exactly the same board, that is sort of like a shadow cabinet. It'll be the same people. It's not even a shadow cabinet. It's exactly the same boards for both, so that when and if the time comes to make the switch, we can make the switch. And in the meantime, that the nonprofit can serve as a much simpler money conduit, because you can take direct donations from it. It's a lot easier for smaller banks to get into the CRA space with a straight up nonprofit than trying to get inside city government.
Tax write-offs.
Tax write-off issues, the ability for it to, and so that its functionality may gradually come into place as we see it. So that was the thinking of authority versus non-stock corporation, and sort of where the HAC, and other people correct me on this, that was sort of where the HAC said, okay, well, if we're gonna go with an authority, let's have this parallel structure so that we've got it pointed to being an independent agency.
Comments or comments about that or questions?
I have a question. Is there a time frame in which you want to make the switch, or is it just?
I think we pick it, I think we pick, say, three, that's, I mean, the way I would envision this is that the ordinance would be written is that at any time during the first 3 years, the city council can certainly say, okay, we're done with the authority transfer,
Okay.
but they've at least got to make a vote at year 3, let's say, and every X about whether or not they're going to keep it that way or not, so that we're not sort of stagnant, that that it will force an evaluation of what it's doing and its level of independence and behavior. And we've got a tentative sunset date, whatever that is, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. City council can certainly extend it, but that would be my thinking as to how to do that.
Is there an objection on the staff of creating that dual structure, or is that?
So I don't have any comments about creating that dual structure. I do have a comment about if that's the recommendation or if the intent to have that.
So didn't we include it before when
Well-
we sent it to the city manager?
I think when it went before, it was when we sent, oh, I'll read it directly. Instead of thinking.
Yeah, that was not in there at all.
Well, it said it, yeah.
It's
what
a
it said-
nonstop
You
stream.
know,
Yeah, the Charlottesville City Council hereby authorizes the creation of a nonprofit, non-stock corporation.
So what I'm getting at is, if you're going to suggest that this can turn into another form of land bank entity,
Yeah.
that should be somewhere in the formation section of how to, when, where, how, what, to guide that taking place without it having to be more of an act of Congress or council with additional labor
That's
cross points.
Yeah, that, we gotta build that into the ordinance, that that's part of the thing, it's like, oh, this is a pilot, blah, 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 it'll continue as long as city council says so. But at year 3 or year 5, they gotta do something.
I don't,
Yeah, or
it
whatever.
being a pilot might be more of a policy thing, and I don't think that's gonna be a
Yeah,
regulatory language, but if it, to transition information or have anything, you can put that in that section.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to wrap my head around is, I think what I heard you say before around the staff perspective, that the fact that there's property tax revenue and potentially general revenue in the mix, that the city wants to take the position that they should have, that there should have more control, more effective oversight of that. And I think the part that I'm struggling with, and this gets at what Phil has brought up and others have brought up previously, was like, what are the trade-offs of that? And the trade-offs right now, as I see it, I agree with Phil, like CRA, leveraging private investment donations, those essentially disappear. And then depending on how it's structured, the ability,
If
if it's a city entity.
So
if it's a corporation.
I don't,
If it's a nonprofit, it can leverage CRA investments from banks. It can leverage, it can seek private
banks.
donations, that sort of thing. I think there is,
independently borrow more easily.
so I think there's tension and a reduced ability to leverage those tools if it's operated by the city and is perceived as a city entity.
so those points had been discussed, I think, in terms of comfort level. Leadership began to express more comfort once they saw that, like, Chesapeake's Land Bank Authority is still working with nonprofits and foundations. Albeit it requires a little bit more nuance than saying having a CDC-like entity that can directly transact and do things itself. The points around tax abatement, or excuse me, the taxes and the bonding and considerations of that with regards to planning and having that more aligned or more oversight by executive leadership and elected leadership, being more directly informed by that, those all did come up as well, which is why ultimately the Land Bank Authority, James isn't here, so I think I'm framing it right, was selected as the alternative, yes.
So when I look at the tax revenue side, I'm having a lot of difficulty finding true virtue in that argument. And the way I'd look at it is this way. If the land bank conveys $500,000 in a year, and it gets 50% of the revenue, that's a little less than $2,500 in revenue. That is not to be blunt, it's not really worth city council's attention as to what happens with that $2,500. It pays for stationery, okay. If in the furtherance of affordable housing, on the other hand, the land bank is moving $20 million in a year of assessed values. First, by that transfer, it is increasing the assessed value of that property anyway, by definition. If it's being built from dirt, it's coming up and being improved. If it's a rehab, it's being improved, whatever. That's that at the newly adopted tax rate. If it's $20 million with assessment, is $980,000 a year. But at that point, what you could legitimately turn back to the city management, and city manager and a city councilor is already on the board, and say, okay, this is $1 million that the city revenue would probably not otherwise get. They're already getting $1 million for the other half, number one. And number two, if this 900, do you follow what I'm saying by that? Because if the $20 million in assessed value that it moves wasn't worth $20 million before they started. All right, you're making value. If you're at $20 million, that's $2 million. It's $2 million in tax revenue a year, $1 million of which goes to land bank, $1 million of which that the city otherwise probably would have getting much less money toward anyway gets. And frankly, for $1 million in tax revenue, for $20 million worth of movement every year, that's a 200-to-1 leverage ratio. City council can't do better in deploying that money for affordable housing purposes. It's impossible.
So I have a question for the chair then this body.
Yeah.
Can I hear what, Sunshine, did you finish what you were saying?
Mostly, I'll just recap it and just say that I think
No, it's okay.
the question of balancing the trade-offs of what, what gets gained and lost on one side of the equation versus what gets gained and lost on the other. We went through as a body a pretty extensive process of evaluating our assessment. Admittedly, it's obviously perfectly appropriate for the city to have its own assessment. And I think the fundamental question is like, how do we find the middle ground between those two assessments? And that undergirds like a lot of the, changes
Like a
essentially.
proration.
So that points to a question I was gonna ask, right? So what I'm hearing is, first off, you went through your deliberations, you had a business case for why you went and showed why you all
Sure.
made the case
Yep.
for non-stock standalone, keep calling it CDC, forgive me, corporation.
Corporation.
Process happened, internally, externally, some meetings. Another business case arose about why it should be a land bank authority that had a prevailing influence on how we got here. So my question is it the position you all would wish to say, hey, city, we hear you, but we really think the best business case is standalone CDC? And if that's the case, then the discussion here is very different versus, okay, we've heard this land bank authority, what do we need to make this work?
Right, is it a tweak or is it a
Yeah,
going back to
that's-
what we,
That's a different meeting, and I really kind of want to understand the purpose of this conversation.
It's a good question. I would like to understand that as well. I mean, I think just a little bit of history is that I think we work a lot better with HAC and staff than historically we have. And in the past, what has happened is something nobody wants, which is HAC has come forward with a recommendation, staff has their own, and then council is given these two side-by-side competing recommendations and are asked to make on the dais this choice, and you have HAC members and staff members privately lobbying, council members doing that. I think we kind of like to avoid that, but I don't know, it may be possible to put forward something that says, here's what is recommended by staff or here are two alternatives, here are the pluses and minuses, but I'm not sure we want to go that direction. I'd like to know from.
But I'm not understanding it that this is something that I'm just gonna say, I don't know, I'm wrong, the city managers has looked at and has come up with. I'm not hearing that the
So,
staff.
Yeah, you're right. When Sam, the city
This is
manager and
what
the
he
deputy city
wants.
manager came to you all, more or less, the takeaway was this. We've heard your business case for standalone entity. We're gonna take it, consider it, but note that some of it may get adopted, all of it may get adopted, none of it may get adopted, and that's what happened. Like, let me finish.
Yeah.
The board component is what carried over.
Yeah.
Between meetings that, and I'm not privy to every meeting that Sam and the deputy city manager had, excuse me. But they came back to staff with the business case of, here's why we need to consider a land bank authority. Have you all looked at other land bank authorities and what's the differences here? What's the trade-offs? Pretty much what Sunshine just laid out. We presented that, and still the directive and understanding and consensus among staff, even among some in OCS, myself included, I saw the value in why they wanted to pursue the land bank authority.
So what is that case?
So,
Go ahead, Mike.
and I would just add, I think part of the conversations between city council and the city manager and staff about going the authority route was that part of that cost benefit analysis, and maybe some of the legal analyses are wrong, and I don't know where this would come down in terms of which is better, but part of the cost benefit analysis for the city in terms of authority was it seemed like that was far more likely that it would have bonding authority, and for the city that weighed heavily in terms of with the Carlton mobile home park example, if that was bondable by the city, it still would have been, a challenge to figure out, but it would have been way easier than having to fund it with cash. And so part of the discussion was realistically for the first 5 years or so, with that, the additional fiscal room the city has with being able to bond, does that give more flexibility to the land bank in the amount of money it could get through Community Reinvestment Act or private sources or the size of its portfolio? And genuinely, I don't know which is the right direction, but that was, I think, one of the arguments as well. In addition, there was definitely a concern from the city manager in terms of wanting some level of more direct oversight just because of the city's involvement, but
Yeah, unfortunately, this kind of gets to something that we've been stuck on for a while, and I think we'd all like to get past that, and that's org chart. It comes to a question is who does the hack make recommendations to? Does the hack a recommendation body of city council or of the city manager? And again, I think everybody here wants to all be on the same team. But what happens when we come up with this sort of fundamental, what at least I think one member of the hack feels like is maybe a fatal flaw or something close to a fatal flaw? It's different, and I don't have the
Well,
answer.
back at the beginning, we did have this process that we were gonna have a working group to be this intermediary body, and it seems to me that should have been pulled in during some of these discussions before we sort of got back a product so radically different, that just sort of vanished.
Okay, so I was gonna recommend a path forward. Not with detail, but with sort of process, meaning staff, city manager have put forth this. Clearly, they made ample changes and probably didn't do so lightly. There was, thought that went into that. The likelihood of us saying, nope, we're going back to this other one, and is probably not viable. As an alternative, what if we go through the process of identifying where we see those flaws, whether they're fatal or otherwise, where we have questions around the trade-offs and whether this is actually worth it, and we pose those as our concerns with the hope that they influence a second draft.
That makes sense
And
to
I
me.
thought that, from staff, I'm consistent with that, I agree with that, I thought that was the purpose of this meeting. So if
Okay, so
that's
these
the
are
case,
recommendations to the city manager's office, not.
And or questions, like some of these are like, how would Chesapeake, for example, engage a CRA or other,
And I just wanna speak to my interpretation of the board target communication of what I believe is the expectation of executive leadership, my leadership at OCS. It's my understanding that yes, you all, in terms of you're an advisory group to the city, i.e. the council leadership, right? But that in terms of that funnel and how that funnels up, it comes through the city manager's office. In fact, Office of Community Solutions is within city manager's portfolio. So if you all have like a recommendation formal, you want to take a motion, and it becomes like a hack, not the opinion of one or two, but this is hack's statement. We all, whether majority or not, we're putting this forth as hack's opinion that goes straight to the city manager, obviously through James, because he's the deputy over OCS, and that gets communicated to council. It doesn't dial in line with me, like it just, I know, I just want to state that, like, that's how I've been told that the community, that process happened.
And I do just want to confirm as well that, in this instance, when the hack made a recommendation, it was not just in public meetings, but in private meetings with council. The city manager presented hack's recommendation and discussed it. So I just want to confirm, like, it's not as if that process is being used to try to like shuttle information away from council for those who aren't watching or attending these meetings, which in the past I know has been a concern.
I have one question. If we take the route of working with the city and doing the authoritative side of it, wouldn't it expedite this land bank because you already have people in place? Or you have staff members that could help expedite this, rather than if we were to go with a standalone nonprofit, we would have to do all the elections. I mean, to start a nonprofit is not easy.
Yeah, there's some steps that that involve creating a nonprofit that doesn't involve, like, that aren't indicative of creating the authority. However, I think the time it takes is still the same time it takes because for example, if this was it, the document, they
Right.
say, let's adopt it. We still have to have the public hearing, we still have to go through the statutory
Okay.
requirements, and then the attorney has to incorporate it.
Okay, so
So
it's not really much of
It
a
doesn't save
difference.
much time.
Okay.
What does it, I think where it does reduce some time and is that it should lessen conversation about who's doing what in terms of staffing. We've already kind of identified OCS and some members of our team and where there might be crossover with NDS who might need to provide support, long range planning, whatever. There's things that have already been discussed about internally that or what ifs that would not be relevant if we were doing the city corporation.
Okay,
Thank you. So I'm gonna rack it into a side conversation, try to get to what I think is the question on the floor, which is in terms of process, do the other people here feel comfortable with us reviewing this and making a list of notes or recommendations to send back to the city manager to say, we'd like you to think through this or reconsider this, rather than this being something else, a standalone recommendation to council.
No, I mean, I think that's a productive. I think we need to make clear where we still have these differences. For example, the shadow. Okay, if we're gonna do it that way, let's do this shadow. I think we need to go through this almost line by line and say, either this is why we felt this way about this. Why are we doing it this way? This seems to be better, and make those edits as we go. I think that's the way to go, because if we just push back and say, no, we don't want to Sunshine's point, it's not gonna get us anywhere. They're gonna say, okay, fine.
So what we're trying to do is go through this, come up with a list of comments to send back to the city manager with the hope that
Right.
there'll be additional thought into a next draft or thought goes into it, but the draft might have different things.
So can I hear everybody else's?
I actually wanted to, could I ask Nicole a specific question?
Yeah,
first?
yeah, I really want to hear from Nicole.
I do too, but about this idea has popped up about naming the sort of the backstop of this nonprofit as Phil called it, this sort of shadow entity that could be stood up concurrently with this. How do you feel about that being in an ordinance? Does that make sense?
I know, I was thinking about that. I don't know, honestly. I think I would like that as far as, this isn't a legal answer, but like as far as transparency goes, like I think, shadow is like inherently feels.
In the British parliamentarian view, where
Yeah.
shadow means to follow around,
I-
not to be in the shadows.
I know.
As
And
in
that's-
shadowing at work,
Yes,
right?
yes. And I think that putting it in the ordinance perhaps is an opportunity to highlight like why and the purpose
And
of
we
it
won't use the word shadow.
and not using the shadow. As far as like whether it has to be there or not, I don't think so. I think that can be something that the land bank can decide once it's operational. Like the land bank can say, we want to have this organization act, alongside us.
So follow-ups. Couldn't the organization, couldn't the land bank entity just as well create it if they wanted?
That's what I'm saying.
And then, so versus them, you all naming that it has to exist at the onset and then dissolving it seems a little bit, I don't know,
What's the downside to doing that?
what's the upside?
If
Like
it's
why?
easy to establish and easy to dissolve.
Well, I'm curious as to if it's, I'm just curious to fragment.
To me, it's like using
why do
class
it?
having all your tools.
But I'm also
set up.
curious as to why you
so that
didn't
there
call
would be
for
even-
a shadow organization when you had it as a standalone entity. There
Right.
was no recommendation to have a
Right.
shadow entity created. So is
I
this
think it-
really,
Sorry.
so is it really about a lack of, is there concern about the effectuation of how it's set up now? Where you think that this shadow entity will create some more effectiveness or credibility or something that did not exist? Because now it sounds like, well, if the city's gonna do it, we need to watch the city. That's what I'm concerned about.
So
Oh,
it
no.
was, it wasn't, I said, well, I was the author of that. Well, go ahead, finish your thought.
I just want to clarify, because that's important. I think, I mean, my understanding is the reason why people want to do this other entity is for the
Correlating
purpose-
entity.
Correlating
This
entity
parallel entity.
is for the
Parallel,
purpose of, you know, private donations can now be tax written off, and I guess CRA money. That's the only purpose of why this
Well,
correlating
authorities can
entity.
do that. Authorities can do it. Like I said, there are additional steps. It's not as.
Oh,
They
well, then
can
I
get
don't
set
need
up.
Can do that?
The CRHA, for example, is doing it already. They work with
Side
nonprofits.
foundation.
That's a great idea.
So,
But yeah, so the other piece of that was one, the functional utility going out the front door is easier if it's a standalone right then and there, because there aren't the steps and all it can do is be a funnel. But number two
Yeah.
is that city management has presented this as a pilot. And they want to do this for a few years and do something else.
Right.
And maybe cut it loose. It seems to me that to facilitate that and give a basic framework for that, it's very low cost just to say, yes, all of you directors of the authority are also on this board of directors. I mean, I've started a nonprofit, I've run 2 nonprofits, started one. Starting a nonprofit on paper is simple. Running a nonprofit with substance, that's difficult, but the
So,
paper of it.
To answer,
Yeah, and then that gives, just let me finish my thought, and then that gives us a guidepost, all right, we said this was gonna be a pilot program. Now we have a we've got a
what if
marker,
it isn't a pilot program?
well,
What
then
if
we
it-
say it isn't, then
Okay,
we.
but that's what I'm saying,
Yeah,
is that
yeah.
that's a presumption that the city is gonna cut it loose. A pilot program is meant to test if it's
Well,
gonna
that's
stay
the latest
authority
information
or
we get.
not. I'm just saying that it's gonna be 5 years this and then turn to that is what you wanna have, from hearing you right, memorialized.
What I want memorialized is that it was presented to us in this room by James, that this was initially, we want to do this as an authority. Initially, we want to do this as a pilot. And if that's the case, and that's still the idea, then what we memorialize in there is that to make sure this doesn't slip or go sideways and stays focused, is to have a date where city council has to circle back and say, we're gonna cut this loose,
Right.
or we're gonna defer another year of cutting this loose.
And I think it's not in there because I believe, and James and the attorneys can speak to this themselves, but that it would be the council decision at that time, whenever that conversation comes up,
Mhm.
whether to keep it as is or change it to something else. So this is also why I believe you won't find the word or language around pilot in any form of ordinance.
Right, well, if then I would like to, I guess my idea is that if they're not presenting it as a pilot and there isn't a transitional idea, then let's say so. But it seems to me that if it's being structured as a pilot, having that thing there and ready to go makes it a lot easier than, let's make a decision and changing what this is.
So that sounds like a question.
Yeah.
That you wanna say to
Right.
the executive team, is this a pilot?
I don't want it to be a pilot. Do you
I
want?
don't either.
Let's just do it.
What,
I don't, I still have some concerns. At the end of the day, I have some concerns about who the land bank is. Most of the times, most of the organization, there's not enough representative from the low income community who are on those. And so that is where I'm stuck. But if it is a corporation and the city is shadowing it or whatever word you want to use for the next 5 years, at least there is a chance that there is some participation from the low income community on that corporation.
It's
I
in
think the
this right
way-
here.
it's in it.
It's in there, but I
Look at
think, I gotta look at Chesapeake's again. I
Yeah,
think
but
they-
why still? Yeah, I'm gonna look at it, but still, I just feel like we're not wasting time, but we're dragging on about whether it's a corporation or whether it's what I'm hearing from what you're looking at, the other counties, you can start it and you can still do some of the basic things that you're saying that a nonprofit can do. So why not just do that and let's move on to the,
Also,
to other things? So
Follow
that's
John's
kind of
line.
where I'm at.
Great.
Chesapeake also. addressed-
Chesapeake, I mean.
Yeah, not exactly the same concern as yours, but it was generally, it seemed like that's what they were trying to do, but they also have an advisory board that they wrote into their ordinance. And.
So those are the things that I was just, stuck on. It's like, okay, I would prefer, even though council changed, but I would prefer, that there is a, for the next 5 years, there's someone that is really, like you're saying, shadowing it to make sure that it is serving every.
Well, Joy, does the CRHA have a foundation that can take in private fundraising and?
That's a question for Kathleen.
We're working in partnership with redevelopment with, with a separate nonprofit, but we are in the process of setting up our own nonprofit because it has become a challenge for us accessing certain funding.
So I mean, I'm wondering if that's sort of the rub here, and I don't know that we have the exact language, but that could go forward with the recommendation that we include in the language. That some entity that can do the things that a nonprofit can do, such as provide tax write-offs for private donations, help banks get CRA credits.
Can we follow their model
Be
that they're rolling
established.
out?
So Dana, as to answer your question, I don't think you need to put it in the ordinance. I don't think it's a requirement. But I think it is a good discussion here to talk about whether we want to put it actually in the ordinance or just as like a memo.
Gotcha.
I don't-
You're right. I'm gonna ask your legal opinion here. I know that you're not on here as a lawyer, but is it muddy up the ordinance if it's in there? Is there a downside of putting language in the ordinance?
Yeah, because then it becomes limiting and restricting and you have to go to council to change it. So it's more prescriptive.
CRHA has to come to council to create that foundation whenever they decide to do it, because they've come to us to create city entities, create entities. Here, I agree with Nicole that it kind of complicates things, but it would be the city creating the entity at the onset if you're saying that when this goes live, this other entity should also be live. Because this isn't formed, like if this entity was formed and wanted to create that, they would have to come back to council anyway to create it. There's the same enabling legislation that allows CRHA to create entities, but with the permission of council would be the same enabling legislation that would allow this entity to create that same entity, but it still would have to come back to council.
That's in the land bank ordinance,
It's not, it doesn't need to
not
be.
land bank in
ordinance.
the statement, in the
It's in the
statute.
state statute, yeah.
Okay, so I think we may be circling around consensus on this one. So let me put this out there as a consensus statement and see by a kind of straw poll whether people are in agreement. I think there seems to be general consensus that we think some sort of attached entity would be a good thing that enables the land bank to do some of the things that it can't do as an authority. Any
Yes.
problems with that?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it, but I think underlying that supposition is that we want it to be as effective as possible with leveraging all the tools. If there's a way to do it, if the Chesapeake Land Bank has demonstrated a mechanism for doing it that we don't fully understand, it's fine for the land bank to be on its own if it can actually take advantage of all those tools.
It's the phone.
So it's for me, it's not about setting up a separate entity. It's about just ensuring that we're tapping into all the tools.
Right,
So whether
right.
that's a new entity, a side-by-side entity, or a structure that mirrors an already effective land bank, that's fine too. That's for me, that's the issue.
Should you highlight some of those tools? Like if I heard, for example, how does Chesapeake do X, Y, Z with nonprofit? What's the type of activity do we need to make sure? Do we need to follow up on? Like I'm hoping to get from this questions to take to executive team to discuss, to say,
All of the
These are
things that
answers.
Phil was saying, that
Yeah.
if you,
Let's enumerate those. So is
okay.
it okay? if
Rich
we-
people get tax payoffs.
Tax write-offs,
Tax write-off,
Tax write-offs for donations.
CRA,
CRA.
Community reinvestment.
Community
Act.
Talks about it.
uh,
Thank you.
independent borrowings.
What did you it say?
independent borrowing.
Independent borrowing.
What do you mean by that?
So you can go to the bank and get a loan.
The land bank authority or this new entity?
Well, we-
Either
We
one.
don't care.
Okay.
We want
We
whatever
wanted,
this
we
is,
wanted to
right?
have the tool.
The construct that is taking in land and disposing of it for.
The
affordable
authority can
housing.
borrow money though.
All right, the ability to form partnerships.
But let me go back just a second, just to clarify borrowing money. Yes, if it's an authority, it can bond, but we're talking about something different, which is going to University Federal Credit Union and getting a CRA fueled 3% loan that instead of having to go to the bond market and get a 5.5% loan, because that's the best you can get.
Thanks for clarity. Yeah,
So
I
there are
don't think.
three.
All right, then there's the formation of third-party partnerships.
What do you mean by that?
Sunshine comes to the land bank, whatever it is, and say, let's do X, Y, and Z, and the most efficient way to do that is to form an LLC or a subsidiary entity for that purpose.
Formation of LLCs that this.
Third,
that
yeah,
this
sort of
Can participate, that this. can
participatory, yeah, it's a-
That's gonna be Virginia code that boxes that in. All entities that get created, whether under any guise, is gonna have to come back to council for permission. So it can happen. You just need to
So
understand
even if it's
that
an
It'll be a
independent, it's an
process.
independent,
you're required to come and get council permission. Like
But,
an
but
entity,
can an authority participate as a member in an LLC? I have no idea.
you know, me neither,
Or a joint venture.
or a joint venture of some sort, some
if
instrument.
it's vested, like if it's listed as, it would be the same thing as, like, that's what. Call me if I'm wrong, but like CRHA has a certain percentage in the LLC, but it's not 100%, right?
Yes.
It's like, so even that, if it as little as 0.1 or 1%, whatever it is, they had to come back to the city for permission.
To
So,
form an LLC with
to be a
someone
part
else.
of that.
Okay.
To be a part of,
But that's
to be a member of an
because,
LLC.
it's an authority.
That's because the code says it, to my
Right,
knowledge.
but if there's a parallel entity that is not an authority, that is instead a standalone nonprofit, I'm not sure that it would have to.
But if that authority is signatory or part of that
Yeah,
entity.
I guess you're saying, I see what you're saying.
Were you gonna say something, Kathleen?
Well, I was just going to talk about really quickly, just might help to get out of the weeds, talking about nonprofit formation, just under the section, financing and operations, just to insert something saying, you know, revenue stream could be a partnership or creation of a nonprofit. You know, we've got it covered there, because that's a whole separate thing to establish, and it would hold up this whole process.
So what section, I know the sections aren't numbered, but what?
Yeah,
title of the section?
Financial operation and oversight, I don't know if the pages, so.
It's on the
maybe
second to last page.
Page
Yeah.
7.
I mean, that
Chapter
makes
2.
sense, because if I'm hearing right, this would be the purpose for having that kind of relationship, right?
For
For
financing.
financial.
Okay.
There'd be a partnership or creation of a nonprofit. You could have some language about, you know, with city council approval. But then it wouldn't hold up this whole other
So
document.
that could be like 4, whatever you had it, and then describe.
So that's okay. Do you have any more that you want to
Yeah.
add?
Wherever we put it, so yeah, if you go there, I don't know that this can be fully, so are charitable contributions made to the city or not? You can't break those off. And how about the authority? Can the authority itself, can the housing authority take private donations?
They can accept,
You
but they
can accept
can't,
them, but
they
they
won't
can't
get the
get a right.
letter. So we usually partner with someone, like sometimes we'll partner, like during COVID, there was a lot of masks donated for our residents, so we partnered with FAR. So that, you know, FAR could help with that, and, you know, we do a lot of that with redevelopment as well to get, green funds, but it's just, we cannot, we're quasi-government.
So maybe 4 is like partnerships, and you.
I don't know that we want to necessarily wordsmith here, but put this forward, again, this is going back to Sunshine, but put this forward as a significant concern that we have, that in making this change from a nonprofit to an authority, we are potentially foregoing some of
Squeezing
these
out.
really critical tools, like providing tax write-offs for donations, like leveraging CRA credits, et cetera.
Yeah, and just to clarify one thing, like in here, under financing of operations, A3, it says philanthropic contributions and private investments, meaning that the authority may receive funding through that. What it doesn't clarify in that statement is that unfortunately, those philanthropic contributions, if they came in, would not benefit from the write-off, the tax write-off.
Right, so they're not gonna get them.
So they're not gonna get them, which means it's gonna minimize, that's our current understanding. There may be a deeper level of understanding that through Chesapeake, maybe they have some way around it, I don't know. But that's the concern.
So maybe what we can do to summarize this, because we do have some other issues that we need to talk about, and we are an hour in already, is summarize that we have concerns about this movement. We're not against it, but what we want to do is formalize in a structure or notes to the entity the intent that that this entity needs to be created in a way such that it can provide tax write-offs,
CRA.
leverage CRA credits, and other elements of a
Independent
nonprofit that aren't
Independent
available.
borrowing.
So I have to find out how they're doing it, the other ones, because I don't know if it's like something in their ordinance. Because this language, I mean, if they're doing it through a partnership where they're working with a nonprofit, or they created a foundation or a friends of or something. Like, I wouldn't see that in their thing. I have to find that article that created that. Kind of figure out if that's the mechanism they use, or,
Well,
I didn't see that in their language that they have a separate foundation or anything like that. I just know that looking at their case studies and testimonies of how they are working with foundations.
that is kind of hard to do on a flow basis, though. Meaning that the money comes in, the money goes out. It's like if you're doing it with a third party involved, it comes with the strings attached to what that third party is doing and what the engagement on that particular point is, instead of in general getting an input revenue stream that is an inputted revenue stream.
So I can say, Sam, James, here the concerns, tax write-off, CRA, borrowing private from, not, right? And here's potential solution or frameworks used by others, right? XYZ, here you go. It's kind of just giving you a sketch of what my internal workflow would be.
Yes.
And then I wait, and then, just so you all sense that that's how it goes, so.
And I would express this as a significant concern of HAC.
Right.
Yeah.
Not just
Yeah,
not a minor one, because we think it limits we have no problem with it becoming an authority. We have a problem with some of the things that entails.
Gotcha.
And so we'd really like to see that solved. Yes, Kevin?
I just want to say there are also some inherent advantages of being an authority, that and we do work with foundations, and also there's funds you can access that aren't traditionally available to nonprofits. There could be tax revenue, there could be different things, business rates, things that could be tied in. So you have an opportunity to cover a lot of these.
No, appreciate it. We could go on forward with that guidance, like you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think that would be useful for council, is to just outline the powers everyone would like it to have, and then for each one, if it's an authority versus nonprofit, like, is HAC absolutely certain it can't do that, and is that a problem, or is it we don't know, so it needs further investigation to get a final answer? And then to that point, on the other side of the ledger too, is there anything the authority can do that HAC feels provides any benefit to the nonprofit?
And I think we're beyond kind of setting up this binary authority versus nonprofit. I think we're all, let's move forward as an authority, provided we can find ways to also leverage these other tools.
It
So,
could be
Antoine, so the Chesapeake,
Mhm.
can you find out
Yeah, I can,
these things, how they're doing it? Because it seems like they're doing it,
I can.
and it's, okay,
small scale.
And if it,
but they're still doing it
they're
though.
still doing it. But
Even if it's small
hypothetically,
scale.
Suppose that they're doing it through that third party mechanism, right? You can make that part of the recommendation or work plan that, as this is being considered for adoption, if it's the position of executive leadership to treat that as well, so that's the requirements for this solution, to mitigate the loss of that benefit that this has created.
Yeah, I mean, I think this parallel organization or whatever could, that was my original intent with it, that it would be sitting there so you could just turn to it and say, hey, go get the money. Okay,
We did,
Yeah.
and thank you, we kind of coming full circle. So when I heard parallel organization, initially I was thinking kind of like because we were talking about oversight at one point. And so I was hearing like, we're gonna have an oversight
No.
kind of thing.
No.
That's really crazy.
same, when I meant same board, I meant same human beings on both boards,
Okay.
because it really is a parallel
We've
organization.
beaten those two sections, section authority and
Yep.
section formation purpose to death. I think you have comfortable having the language you need to go forward.
Yes, sir.
Now we're gonna move on to section vision, mission, and values, which is quite different. I think Phil suggested that it's an ordinance. My quick gloss on this is that there were really only two guiding priorities, and the initial one was prioritize affordable housing and then make sure that there's fairness and avoidance of self-dealing. Instead, this is a little bit more directive. Phil, was that what you were getting? I couldn't tell from your note, but I think that.
Yeah, well, yeah, because I didn't realize that it was going just to the top of the page. So under the core values piece, we need to be clear that transparency and accountability, yeah, that's nice for an organization, but this thing is going to be doing real estate deals. Therefore, transparency and public forward decision-making, it can't be that forward looking in decision-making. You can't be discussing transaction by just transaction if you're trying to occupy a position in the market.
Does the CRHA go into closed session when you're talking about land deals and things like that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
So if they can go into closed session, it seems like that's. probably-
Yeah, I just think that under the core values, to make clear that sort of be direct, like, in terms of, as long as that's clear, as long as we're not setting ourselves up.
You wanna suggest adding a sentence that says something like in recognition that this is that they're in the competitive real
To the-
estate
yeah.
market.
If
To the
it's a
extent possible in the
corporation,
market.
I
that,
think that's a given.
that-
Yeah, I don't think we need to add.
That's
I
a
don't think so
given.
either.
And that could change.
Ensuring decision-making processes are open and accessible is a pretty broad, to the extent possible when engaging in the real estate business. I mean,
I don't think you need to add that.
I think that's a given. If you're on any board and you know that there are legal stuff that you're gonna be discussing, you can't discuss it openly.
All right, we're not gonna stay forever on this one.
Right, but that-
Phil's suggestion, adding language up or down, thumbs up. Anyone?
I don't know if it matters, but just put in like effective. Sure.
I'm good with
How
it.
about thumbs down?
Indifferent.
Yeah, I mean, it occurs to me, this is
Nicole,
these are
can you
core
say more about
values.
the down or down
Yeah,
signs?
this is- Yeah,
well, that's true,
Which is
but
broad.
in the next paragraph, they go way down into the weeds on the operation in a way. So I think it's trying to be somewhat detailed.
So, okay, so why don't, it seems like by a narrow majority, people are okay adding some sort of qualifying language to that. Within
Or just
the,
asking for clarification.
within the bounds
Yeah,
of successful real estate
Yeah,
Business.
business or
I
something.
like, yeah.
Perfect.
And then I did have a question I wanted to throw out there. We did spend quite a bit of time. It was a core value from 2017 when we first started looking at this, all the way now to not put multiple uses or dispositions of land on equal footing, because typically land banks do that. They're created to provide room for affordable housing or do economic development or clean up a watershed or something like that. And all along, we were very, very clear that we wanted strong language that prioritized first affordable housing. And I think we even had language that said any and all uses for affordable housing have to be looked at first before it's given over to another
Right.
use. This one it does talk about being a priority, but then there's another place where it simply says disposition can be for these three things, or these are the disposition priorities, and it doesn't actually create a hierarchy of priority. Yeah, let me see if I can find that.
It's a section, chapter 2, section 3, disposition of property, part B, property disposition shall prioritize. And I think I don't know if this would be welcome or not, but there might be a simple change there, which is property disposition shall prioritize in order of, or in order of preference. And then it lists out 1, 2, 3.
Well, I think this tiering, the whole tiering process in and of itself, I think is, I have heartburn on that itself. If I really think that the land bank authority, corporation, or whatever needs to further the city's policies. If the city's policies shift, it shifts.
Are we separating the two?
Can we,
kind of
can we,
get
can we,
one
can we bracket that conversation
Okay.
and first talk about the prioritization of affordable housing over other uses first?
Okay,
So we do have language, this is from page 6.
It is page 6, but that doesn't help.
But from the original, from what we had sent forward originally, the language for the prioritization policy reads as such, and if you'll.
Are you gonna read it up?
I'll read it out, I think. The board shall first prioritize the creation and preservation of affordable housing in alignment with the Charlottesville Affordable Housing Plan and other local planning documents. If use and or disposition of property owned by the land bank entails other uses such as market rate housing and or commercial retail, the land bank shall document the justifications for such other uses in publicly available materials and shall only act upon approval of 2/3 of the available voting members of the board of the land bank at a duly authorized meeting of the board.
And
And
I
so-
hear a recommendation on how to include that into this. I
Well,
think you were
there-
getting to that.
Well, you could simply, there are lots of different ways, but you could simply substitute that for chapter 2, number 3B.
Or some pithier version of it. Because that's
Can I
pretty
ask
long.
why it wasn't included?
I don't, without looking at the, 'cause there's like a couple of documents that got track changes and changed without seeing the comment for that section on your version. I don't know.
My guess is that, and I was speaking for Sam, I wish Sam were here, is that the city manager probably wants a little bit more freedom to identify priorities in the city and that's,
But that's an important edict. Maybe there's language that you just write when he has that freedom.
and our concern was, I mean, and the reason why the hack was the one who inaugurated conversations on the land bank was that we wanted to prioritize underutilized land for housing, given the priority of housing in the comprehensive plan, in the community. And so we were pretty intentional and deliberate about this, because most land banks and most disposition of land in most cities goes to urban blight or creating parks or things other than affordable housing. And we were very, very strong about this.
That's a primary focus.
So I can elevate it back to their attention, his attention, to consider that specific section over B2.
Yeah, or however it can be rewritten, but yeah, that's the intent, is that it's for house, this is created for affordable housing, period. But there may be some circumstances where it's better used for something else. That's rather than saying, let's look at each one of these parcels and let's put affordable housing up there with commercial and park and all that.
Ultimately, it'll be their decision, but with Sam, is the city manager has a part of the governance, right? The city manager has an
Or
appointee.
designate.
Or designate. So I think there's a middle ground for that, for sure. I think if I just copy that and send that to him.
Well, that's my opinion, but I want to make sure I'm not speaking for the whole
Yeah, we
group.
want to incorporate that language. I think that, and yeah, make an argument for that language in lieu of the language that's being used. Yeah, I think that's.
And I think that may then satisfy your second concern, which was naming some of the priorities, where instead what we said is that priorities for affordable housing are gonna change.
Correct.
Via the housing policy, which is a living document. And so it may be that that 15% or below becomes, 10 years from now, what we're focusing on, or.
Well, and also
Yeah.
to not, to again, get back to this idea of it being a facilitator, not a provider. And facilitating housing may involve it putting in, if it's working with a Habitat or an AGIP or a PHA, that the authority's actions or the land bank's actions are designed to help them do better at the deeply affordable. So maybe it's, yeah, well, it may be 60 to 80 housing, but it makes the 30 and below that it's connected with work. And let's not get confused by saying, you know, let's facilitate that instead of having the land bank itself have to make these priorities, because then it gets muddy as to what the priority is. We're gonna further the plan. If, you know, and it's gonna act with its partners in that way, I think. I think that trying to split it up into this is it's handcuffing.
Frame this in the clear enumeration for me, so when you go back to your minutes and see if Antoine carried forward everything I was supposed to.
Well, I think
There's
there,
one other one.
I think there are two issues. I think the one issue is I think I'm hearing unanimity on the part of this committee that that section, the chapter 2, section 3B, in some way, shape or form, we'd like to see that replaced with the original 3A from the original ordinance, which prioritized full stop affordable housing. And then, you tell me when you're ready.
I'm ready.
And then I think the second issue is, I think people, Phil had this issue, and I join with him in having this issue, the creating the tiers. I want to support 30% and below. We're finding that the policy, we have families who come into our program at 26%. We help them improve their income, and they're at 32%, and we no longer can pull down that money.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? Sorry. What I'm missing is it lays out the priorities, but it's not specifying which priorities take precedent over other priorities. It's just saying these are priorities.
Sure, that's high priority, moderate priority, standard priorities. That's creating hierarchy, that language.
Oh, so that, you're right, sorry, I totally missed
And
that.
and
Yeah,
yeah,
got it,
the
got
question
it.
is, why is it in there at all? I mean, in that sense.
Why
in
is
that
the
larger
tiers
sense.
in there at all?
No, I know I know why the tiers are in there, because that's what the city through its current housing
Right,
strategy
that's what I
says that we
mean.
want to prioritize. But I think what you're saying is that those are already
It does.
prioritized in the housing strategy,
Right.
as well as a whole bunch of other stuff,
Right.
like creating opportunities in high opportunity for low income housing and high opportunity parts of the city.
Right.
So
which is-
maybe the chairs, I mean, I don't have a problem with the chairs being in this. Maybe it's just a way of just reminding you.
Yeah,
I don't have a problem with that chairs being in there.
So Joy, I'll push back on that just a little bit.
Sure you can.
Those tiers are already in the housing policy.
I got you.
But there's a lot of other stuff that's really good in the housing policy as well. And by naming this as the priority, it kind of negates the other stuff in the housing policy.
So,
what's the other
and,
stuff in the policy there?
and I'm glad we're having the conversation because, for me, even though there's a housing policy and we talk about, 30% and below, a lot of 30% and below is not being met. It's only certain organization who's trying to meet that by doing the things that they're doing. It's just a small amount of, so that's what I'm looking at.
I hear that. And
Is to keep that there so that people understand that, yes, we need to be doing something about that. Because you just gave an analogy about some people come in with 25 and you increase their, their income and they raise it, but there's still a population where because of whatever, they can't get their income increased because of a lot of
Yeah,
things.
no, I'm absolutely not arguing against you on that one. The spirit of this, I want us to push as much of our subsidy and our resources below 30%. Full stop.
Just know anywhere I'm coming from,
Yeah, no,
I am coming from an advocacy part of that people from 0 to 30 and 40% deserve to have
it's
housing.
the
And
most
so,
pressing need.
Yeah,
Joy, I'm not disagreeing with you at all. In fact,
Okay.
I'm agreeing with you wholeheartedly.
okay.
All I'm saying is that this is already in the housing policy and there are other elements of the housing policy is a longer, more nuanced thing that has this in it, as well as some other things like looking to create opportunities in high income areas so that kids from a lower, like a lower performing school, they have an opportunity to go to a higher performing school, for example. And I use that as one of like 100 different examples of things that are in there. And that's something that evolves and changes every year. And so to me, just referring to that, to the policy is saying that this isn't operating independent of it, doing whatever it wants to do on its own. It's here to serve the vision for affordable housing of the city.
And I could say, you know, I like number one and take out number 2 and 3, but because you're already doing it, but I'm not, because I believe everybody in all tiers should have the opportunity to have housing, and we should be looking at that. So I don't have a problem with it.
No, I don't have a problem with this as a policy of the authority. I have a problem with it being in the ordinance as being too restrictive and not being in sync with the rest of the city. And if it pushes you, it increases siloing. Okay, you know, instead of the cooperative side of
I'm
things.
trying to, so this section is really trying to do that. It's trying to be more in sync with the city, and it's also recognizing where the city was out of sync even with itself. Part of the 25, the report I did a couple of weeks ago, and I granted, I did say, highlight that this is pipeline oriented, so a lot of this 30% AMI unit or units that address that market is in the works, it's not materialized yet. But if you are associating this strictly with the affordable housing plan, for example, it says 30% AMI, 50% and 80% in terms of the funding target mechanisms. If you're aligning it with the CDU program, for example, or the new development code, this is gonna cap it at 60%. So where does that leave the folks who are going up to 80% to make their land actions work or transactions work, right? So that's why it goes 51 to 80, is trying to capture what's already happening. And then here it speaks to 31 to 50, to say that I understand. I think it could be bad thinking, not the best design, but that's what it was trying to do. If there's a better way to do it.
So this expands, you feel like this expands it over and above.
It was an effort.
I see. Sunshine?
The piece that is missing in the affordable housing plan, I think is also sort of missing here, is the recognition that when even though, you know, the need assessment is very clear, the highest priority is in that 30% and below, it is also the most expensive to do. And if you make high priority if you make that in the affordable housing plan and here, there's a trade-off, like everything's a trade-off. If you make that a priority, it means there are less units that are getting built because you're putting more subsidy into those specific units. As opposed to like a different set of priorities where you are choosing to put subsidy across. And that's the approach that we've taken. But like, and if we would be willing and interested, for example, doing more 40 and 30% AMI units, but we need another $100,000 per unit from the city or whatever the threshold is. So I don't want to get into the details here, but the point I want to make is that I think it's fine to I'm actually okay with it being in here, but I do think there needs to be some recognition that it comes with a trade-off, which is less units out of this process than otherwise.
I think we were calling some of the conversation. There is an alignment with recognizing that the 30% below is most expensive, which is why it also came up that then if any folks who are seeking a leverage, that should be seeking a leverage land bank activities, it should be folks that have any component of percentage of 30% in their portfolio. Like, we don't want it to where we're looking at 4 years in transaction activity and it's all 80% type
Gotcha.
projects.
Yep, I agree with that.
Yeah, I still don't think it belongs in the ordinance. I think this is a bylaws issue, a policy issue, and that because that changing the ordinance, well, you can always go and change the ordinance. Yeah, but you can, but you don't. And, you know, I think, I don't see that it serves a purpose in the ordinance. I think as a guiding principle, it's absolutely right. I have heartburn with it being in the language of the ordinance itself.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
If it's instance of this team, there's community to recommend taking it out or changing it, that.
Well,
I say keep it in.
it sounds like just including some reference to the affordable housing plan without completely
do.
taking them out would work, because if I'm understanding some of the concern, like, an example would be, let's say there's 30% AMI project, but it's homeownership or it's in Greenbrier, and that's advancing, wealth creation or desegregating
Right.
the income segregation in Charlottesville. There's something the board could look to say, even though that was 35%, technically not 29%, we can say it's high priority. My understanding,
I think the plan is more, has this in it, but it's more robust but I think what I heard Antoine say is that there's really not much in the plan for 51 to 8 or 60 to 80. And so this is trying to go above and beyond the plan and say there are some circumstances. Did I hear you right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So, so we have a few options here, and again, we don't have a unlimited amount of time. Joy has suggested we keep this language in here. I think Phil has suggested we take it out. Mike, did you say take it out?
Keep it in, but but.
I didn't know if just including reference to the affordable housing plan addresses the.
I think you were arguing we're doing that in the prior paragraph, which says this is our value and we're gonna follow
already
those
mentioned.
documents.
Yeah, some of this stuff becomes a little prescriptive,
Yeah.
like for 31 to 50, let's focus on LIHTC and home ownership. It starts
Yeah,
to me to be
where
a
did that
little,
come from?
it starts to,
Yeah,
it starts to be a little prescriptive in this ordinance.
and again, seems to be pointing towards a provider model rather than a facilitator model.
But I mean, I wouldn't mind saying something like pointing towards the affordable housing plan with while maintaining a focus on producing units for people below, underserved people below 30%, and also inclusive of folks with circumstances where people make up to 80% or something like that. So it's kind of building on it's emphasizing the most important part of the plan. I'm with Joy. I think under 30 is the most important part of the plan. And I'm also with Antoine that there are circumstances where the plan in its present form may be chilling for certain opportunities that require a blend of incomes.
What if the prescriptive language that is in these 1, 2, and 3 sections really starts to take more shape after the authority shall, and the authority shall first prioritize, and the authority will. If that becomes a matter of discussion for SOPs later, but in terms of just defining, bridging really, the affordable housing plan is trying to, like, for example, it talks about what the household category classifications are. That's HUD language. Okay, so I believe everything before the authority shall is a little more less prescriptive and less technical,
Yeah, so you just delete the last sentence of each one of these.
but they're gonna come into play. Just you won't.
Just
not you.
relax maybe the prescriptive language.
Yeah, so it's be the last,
Not
essentially the last
shall
sentence of
first.
each, yeah.
It's like,
Make good effort or something like
Yeah.
that.
exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the downgrade shall.
I'm fine with that. People
Yeah.
good going forward with that. I still don't love it. I still think
Yeah, I mean,
pointing to the
yeah.
housing, but I think as a compromise. that's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, but getting rid of the shall, I mean, because you can stub your toe pretty hard on the shall in the middle of something.
You know, Antoine, I would suggest that the introductory paragraph that the authority shall should refer to the housing strategy. You know, the authority shall be
Policy.
guided by the housing
Shall take all
strategy.
this, yeah.
And in part, and one in particular,
Yeah, specifically prioritize
So,
this, income levels.
It's somewhat an internal debate, but what what is the housing strategy for the city? Some believe that it's now the affordable housing plan is
yeah, I would-
strictly the affordable housing.
I would
plan.
say use the term affordable housing plan,
I'm
because
sorry,
that
yeah,
is that is the only thing
Yeah,
that
you
we
talk to
can
some old
clearly
timers,
define.
they'll say, well, housing policy one says this, and then the
Two.
CAF
Yeah.
ordinance says this.
No, the housing plan, I'm sorry. just use-
It's okay.
I use the wrong
I-
term.
But yes,
Use it on language.
affordable housing plan.
Suggesting whatever
Okay,
word.
housing plan.
And then most of this language can come out and say, especially emphasizing
Yeah.
the tiers of affordability.
Okay. I follow.
All right, I have one thing that's gonna be really controversial, and I hate to even bring this up.
Are you sure you want?
No, I hate that we're here, but under core value C, you guys know that Doge has a, and I probably shouldn't be saying this on live TV, but you know that there are algorithms that are looking for specific words that are eliminating programs and specific grants to entities that have DEI language in their charter. And we may choose as a city to say, sorry.
I think this is a question council can
Yeah, it's much bigger than this.
handle.
Yeah.
But I would flag that as a,
Red line equity, at least come up with a different way of expressing
yeah,
something
call it
similar.
something different.
So,
Or the council can say, you know what, we may lose some grant funding,
Yeah,
but we're gonna
Stick a
stand,
thumb, yeah.
we're gonna stand by our commitment to
That's-
be.
I just don't think it's something if you don't need to wade into it, but you
Yeah.
can if you want.
We wanna flag it as a potential threat to funding for an entity that has that in its charter. I hate saying it.
No, we're aware, we've seen the literally algorithms to cut grant funding.
Could mean real estate equity too.
That's
Right.
true. That's
Words like-
Thank you.
Words like female.
No,
are
but-
No, I know, or like
Um,
diversity of species, yeah, I'm
It
talking
has
about
come up as an
bugs.
awareness discussion to management and from, but we.
So have we covered those sections
Really?
well enough for colleagues before we move on?
Can I just, but before we move on, just flag, Antoine, can you and I, if we have time afterwards, sit down and go through the affordable housing plan to talk about that 60-80% thing? Because I just was going through it and I'm not seeing the disconnect, so we can just, but that's irrelevant to this document. so I'm
It's
sure
in
we
the funding target section.
should- Okay, let's talk about it.
Alright, so we stopped, you would sort of describe the reason for changes up until the section just went through. Now we're on section property acquisition. Talk about that. Do we want to move on to,
Just so Joy knows, the board of directors is the same that we had recommended. The board of directors, right? The makeup of the board of directors, and governance and operations, because we're skipping over that.
Isn't there one exception?
What's the one
What
exception?
was it?
I think, which is under referencing the city manager.
Yeah.
It says city manager or an employee. I think we had language in there that said either like senior leadership or some, like
City
some,
manager.
ensuring that it's
Yeah.
not, a clerk.
so I
That doesn't have any
I
power.
looked back at that and I don't think you're right.
No,
Okay.
we,
We may have said it, but it's not in this draft.
yeah, well, I remember that there was a discussion where Alex was pushing back against the hack pretty strong, that he felt that the city manager really should have wider discretion in that, and we generally disagreed, but it didn't sort of
I see.
make it, and I'm not sure what the objection is to.
I think, or an employee is in here because it was meant that, because in some instances, the city manager was able to appoint somebody not employed by the city. In some example we saw. And I think that came up in some internal
Yeah.
conversation, not with you all, but.
This language is exactly the same language we forwarded to the
Yeah,
city
and
manager before.
then we
Then,
still-
then maybe it's just a comment,
Yeah,
which
the comment
is,
that's, we really.
like, we would like that to
Deputy
be a senior level employee, if there's a way to ensure that.
If I'm remembering right,
I
I
think
think
that
what
was
we
in your
wanted.
memo.
Yeah,
I think it was in the
It
memo.
wasn't,
Yeah,
that's what I'm.
Yeah, it's in the memo, where we were like, yeah, we really think it needs to be a deputy city manager. Or, and again, that,
They can decide which.
well,
Someone with authority.
yeah, well, the idea behind that was also on the independent side, which is if the board needs to really act independently, it needs to be somebody who can represent the city's interests and speak to them. and speak for them in a certain way too, that the city councilor and the city manager, they say, well, we can't, that ain't gonna work.
So we're comfortable with this being a note.
I know,
going
Yes.
forward?
Is this also, you know how we were talking about with John C., for example? Where it's written in the language that it's the executive director of CRHA. We're trying to, the recommendation motion I had was to allow for him to send a designee if he can attend. Like, is it the interpretation that this is really a seat for the city manager, but if in the event he's not present or can,
That's not the way I'm reading it, I'm
or
reading
is
it.
this is a person who's a part of the,
Right, so this is Sam, or James, or Eden, or Ash, you know, I mean, like deputy level.
so that, that's an appointee, not a designee. in my
Yeah.
mind.
To serve as his or
Designee can be like when-
representative,
I think
yeah.
it
Yeah,
would be
he can, yeah.
an appointee designated by.
Yeah.
I think good call,
Yeah.
good catch.
Do they define designee in the definition section? Because they put designee in quotes. If you're putting designee in quotes, you mean something, hold on.
Well, I thought it was just because it refers, never mind.
Yeah. That screams that it has a specific meaning,
Well.
because it's in quotes.
It's just because they refers to designee again in the next sentence,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
instead of
the-
saying his or her representative.
Is it, yeah,
Cause that's what it is, it's like,
Cause,
or his
yeah,
representative.
It defines it
is
right
who
here.
he
It's the
did,
person
yeah,
that's
is
present.
is who he's saying.
I think appointed.
It's still him, it's still
It's
his
still his,
final,
yeah.
it's his seat, but he may not be at a meeting and he may send a designee.
This, no, but it says this member's term, it's not the city manager, it doesn't have to be the city manager, this.
But it's
to
who he
serve
says
as
it-
his then this member's term,
But what I
yeah.
hear you all saying is that you want it to be an appointee or the city manager.
Yes,
Right.
I think your
An
word clarifies.
appointee
it.
or the city manager.
Appointed, just make. it
And isn't it,
appointee
you should be going backwards?
City manager or. an-
It should be the city manager and his appointee. Or his appointee.
Yeah.
Out of respect.
All right, anything else on that section before we let Anton tell us about,
You
the
can
next
change
section,
that right now.
financial operations and oversight? Were there any changes to that, substantive, that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, there's one catch. I know we just made recommendation around reframing the mission, vision, values, but under general powers, 1E, it defines moderate priority as 0 to 60%, but I think that's,
Where were you looking?
so general powers, under property acquisition disposition.
Bottom of the page.
Okay,
General
Oh,
powers.
That's not aligning with the tiers.
Yeah, it's just misaligned there.
I don't, does it really need to be there? Just affordable dwelling units and just,
I think we
In
can carry over
accordance
the
with-
same, we
yeah.
can carry over the same, whatever language we come up with.
yeah, I just think deleting the particularly the critical need of moderate priority or earning, you could say units. In accordance with city council's endorsed housing priorities, you just take out that bit, which muddies things unnecessarily.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you just prioritizing the acquisition and development of affordable housing, affordable dwelling units.
Or housing earnings.
In accordance with city council's endorsed housing
Right.
priorities.
You don't need to
Because
re-
we're already
you don't need to
covering this, yeah,
re-specify.
yeah, you don't have to re-specify again.
Gotcha.
Particularly if you don't get it exactly right, it's something to argue about later. Oh, it doesn't say the same thing.
Okay, once again, from committee members, anybody else want to talk about anything before we get to financial operations and oversight?
Yes. So under acquisition of property, I just want to make sure that I understand this. This is more of a clarification question. So under acquisition property, how I read that paragraph to mean, and I just want to make sure we're all on the same page, that if the land bank is acquiring any property inside the city's jurisdiction, then it does not require city council vote. But if it is acquiring property outside of the city's jurisdiction, it does require city council vote. Is that?
That's the intent, hopefully to read that way, but yes.
You good with that?
Yes.
Everybody good with that?
I don't think
Sunshine
it's
good with
necessary.
it, I am.
I think that having city council involved in any individual transaction is a bad idea, just in terms of process. So,
Time.
Anything else? I'll ask the question again. Anything else before section blank financial operations and oversight?
What did you just say? Say that again?
so if you're in a transaction of buying it, part of the purpose of an authority is to be able to act, right? So if you bring city council's vote into it, then you have to schedule for the meeting, it's gotta get on, it's gotta get voted, it's gotta get done. And that's bringing a whole other layer of bureaucracy and process into a real estate
You
transaction.
guys can hold closed sessions,
Bureaucracy
like
outside of,
within,
anything outside of the city
Like-
city limits.
Right,
how quickly could
So
city
if you're trying to
council?
buy a site in Fluvanna,
Yeah,
no, you can't move right away. You need to talk to the council.
How quickly could council move on something like that? Mike?
and I guess my count.
If the council wants to, you could have a special meeting the next day, if council wants to do that. So if council wants to make something like a priority within the day, you could have a
You need
meeting.
like 2 votes of council to call the meeting or something.
Pretty much mayor or someone else, and then have the clerk advertise it as a
So the
special.
process would be there's
Not that
something, land available in Fluvanna. Bring it to the, whatever, the chair brings it
But in
to,
my mind, though, this acquisition, transaction, or land banking activity, that's not, like, you could be in negotiation without city council necessarily being there.
Yeah.
It's just the final transactional piece that would require, so like all the negotiations can happen behind the scenes.
Yeah, I still have heartburn on it, particularly if you've got the city manager and a city councilor sitting there and they say, this is a stupid idea, board of directors, we don't wanna do it. I mean, then you've got a revolt on your hands.
I think,
Yeah,
I think we can move on, but I think the tension, this doesn't apply for city limits, and the tension is just the city wanting oversight.
I get
If
it.
this is our money, if there's a project in Fluvanna.
Assuming it's still in there.
when you start to learn how to play regionally, Mike, come back to us.
We hope.
All right, any other questions or comments before we get to financial operations and oversight? Hearing none, Antoine, take it away.
All right, where to start? So I was thinking, is your example, do you have the? Yes.
Where are we now? Financial.
2 more pages.
So, the general internal conversation, if I remember right, was that how closely, because cities are Virginia code that we have to follow with regards to property dispositions and acquisitions or what have you. And then also, we have the housing authority. So it was an internal conversation about like, hey, let's have this as nimble as possible, but also not step on or violate any thing that this entity as an authority will be required to follow. So that's why we ended up with the, particularly as you get into the last 2 sections of this really is where this comes into play. But the annual reporting came about with regards to conversations on compliance monitoring and what have you. And then the exempt for taxes, we've already touched on that. We didn't change anything. That's a straight line from the code. I think where you all may really want to kind of elevate questions or ideas would be A and B of the financial operations, but to the point that our colleague here from the Housing Authority has made regarding partnerships, I do feel like this would be an appropriate section or inclusion to offer some general regulatory wire frame for how we might, but it doesn't need to be if you all don't feel it necessary. But this was not informed by your draft much of any, really.
Does an ordinance need to specify how it can receive its funding?
I'm gonna say I don't think so.
I don't know.
1A5, is
I was
there,
gonna,
can we slash up to
Slash up to.
50%, just do 50%? The city council said they wanted to do it with less than 50%.
you're taking us on a tangent for now. A
Am I?
good one, but one that I'd rather deal with when we get into the minutia of this, and that is the question of, do we even need to have, I mean, shouldn't this be as broad as possible, that the authority may receive funding through all means allowable under the statute?
And just be
right?
done with it.
I was gonna suggest something like not what you said, which would be better, but I was gonna say like 1A6 and any other sources. So what you're saying might be more efficient. But I don't know.
Because what I'd hate to do is there be something that, you know,
We skipped inadvertently, yeah.
we skip inadvertently or something else comes
That's what I
along.
was looking for there.
Keep it broad.
How's it contrast from your previous section 6 of financial operations? Well, it's right there.
That's a good question.
This adds language about philanthropic, state and federal grants and city appropriations designated specifically for that. I think that's really getting at maybe some CIP planning, I'm not really sure. But,
Yeah, 6A for, I'll go ahead and read this.
Yes, sir.
6A in draft we sent forward, financing of operations, 6A says the Charlottesville Land Bank Corporation may receive funding and may receive and retain payments in accordance with the provisions of Virginia Code 15.2-7509. So basically points to the statute. I guess that's the statute that creates the land bank, is that right? Yep. So it basically says that it can, anything that's kosher, it can do.
You just say, so your argument is to swap
All of this
swap
out.
all of it for our A and B and be done with it.
Yeah, well, then for B, it says 50% of
Yeah.
real property taxes collected on real property conveyed from the land bank to a transferee shall be remitted by the participating jurisdiction to the land bank. And your concern is that it says up to rather than
Yeah,
locking in.
well,
50%.
what you're driving at is just take this financing of operations and drop it back in toto. That, you know, can we revert to this language? Is that essentially what
I
you're
think that
saying?
would be my recommendation to the
Yeah,
group, that we already have this language in here. It captures all of this stuff. The only substantive change is the up
Up
to
to.
versus 50%.
Yeah,
And I think that's a council, that's probably something to flag for council.
I think we just swap it. I think what Dan's saying, swap our 6 for that financing in its entirety.
General agreement around that?
Cause I think, yeah, cause
Joy, you okay with that?
yeah.
Got that, Antoine?
yes.
Okay. All right. Anything else in the, this section, financial operations and oversight, that you want to flag for conversation?
Maybe something under B about standard best practices, but that's fine.
What, which be,
Financing of operations, 1B.
so. Oh, authority shall maintain a dedicated fund for all revenue expenditures which shall be subject to annual audit.
Yeah, the only thing is I'm pushing is a dedicated fund. To me, that sounds a little oddly prescriptive in a weird way. That's why just sort of in accordance with best practices, because maybe there are many funds. And they're all subject to audit.
That is fair, there could be an LLC.
A dedicated fund circle, yeah,
Let me ask, I think this is an internal, so you know, we have the CAF fund.
yeah,
That fund is actually
yeah. whole
it's an
series.
account
Right,
in SAP, and that fund is supposed to manage differently or with unique parameters than other funds that are set up in that account.
yeah, but I think we're all driving at the same, but we get clarity on what a dedicated fund
Fund is, yeah.
really means.
So I'll find out,
Do you mean really adequate funds?
or you like a.
Or only
trust-
one bucket of
Funds that are
money, you know,
dedicated.
just let's be clear about what you're auditing it, oversight. All that, that's fine, but it's one way of looking at this, hey, we gotta put this all in one checking account, you know?
Yeah, no, I really believe it's internal accounting because you don't want it to be like a general fund of a big bucket. You want a land
Get
bank
it.
authority.
On line 19.
So that may be true. The one exception though is if after this exploration around whether a parallel entity needs to coexist with this or not, it's possible that that entity would also control funds outside of the city's coffers.
Yeah,
And the audit, like, so to Phil's point, we just want to say
That's
funds that are dedicated to the use of, not just specifically the ones that are in the city.
So if it's that case, if it's the case that it's an internal mechanism, that this is a fund that's set up like the CAF fund, and it's that dedicated fund, yet this entity will require access of and manipulation of its own funds. Are you saying that it needs its own bank account separate from the
It
city?
might, I don't know, we don't know yet.
I'll give you an example. So we have multiple budgets internal because we have multiple portions of business.
That's
So
right.
for example, when we bought Carlton Mobile Home Park, we created its own budget that has its own
universe.
sources and uses of money. It
Its
has
own banking accounts.
And it rolls up into our 990,
Mhm.
but it's its own separate thing. The way I read this is that you'd have to have one fund that pays for overheads, whether it's Carlton overheads or
Right.
Habitat at Southwood overheads. And I think that this is limiting.
So it's more of I think it's more of an internal thing, but if it's a case where the entity needs a funding line, is one thing, because that can be achieved in this same fund account. But if I'm hearing that if it's something that where funds need to be external of the city, then that's something different.
It's very likely, maybe a strong word, possible that we can't fully anticipate where funds are gonna have to sit. So for example, if we determine that this parallel entity needs to, if it needs to exist because we wanna enable donors to get write-offs, those dollars are gonna sit outside the city coffers.
Yeah, I think it's the definite article is the issue there. I mean, let's make sure that.
All you need to do
a
is
dedicated
remind-
fund doesn't
remove
cause
A.
problems. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Well, it's
Dedicated
segregate,
funds.
you should be able to segregate funds. So for example, the money that comes in, like the rent that is paid by Carlton tenants, I cannot touch that for Habitat operations. I can't build a house over there. That money is segregated. It's its own internal.
But I think
fund.
the simple thing is just replace A with any.
But it required council act. It took council action to create CP 084, AKA the CAP fund. It requires a mechanism for us to be able to do things differently with city
Yeah.
funds in an account versus like general fund dollars. So this might have to be in there.
Well-
I don't know for sure, but I'm gonna ask.
Then it would need to
Yeah.
be something else in addition.
Yeah,
Because
so
you
that
just
doesn't-
want those, any additional funds would also want to be audited.
Yeah, and
That's all
I
my
think
points.
it's the idea of what fund means in the internal
I think
world,
you're-
as in fund in a
And
general
our world.
sense.
Yeah.
And so maybe just clarify all that. Yeah. Again, that's stubbing your toe when you don't need to.
Anything else in financing of operations? Hearing none, dissolution of authority. About that?
Is this where we wanna put the pilot thing again? I'm not saying we should or not, but we're, say like,
Maybe, perhaps under
Council
two, under
said-
dissolution shall revert to the city or such as designated by, to such entities designated by city council or something like that.
But this means if you're gonna, if you're gonna close out if you're gonna end land bank authority,
Right.
not turn it to something else.
Dissolves.
Right, but again, if you're transferring it, you could dissolve that would involve a dissolution process, but also I'm thinking of
You're
shall
right.
revert to the city, is that if you have assets and properties, city council may say, you know what, these are 19 mortgages, we don't wanna revert them, we want
So
somebody to take them, yeah, something.
let's flesh that out. So if we're saying that this is a dissolution process, then we would need a process to basically reestablish the land bank as a standalone corporation.
yeah,
Well-
maybe if we wanna put
Well, then we
something about
rewrite
the
this thing
pilot,
to
we put it in the annual reporting and oversight.
But once you incorporate this as an authority, it's an authority. You would have to dissolve it to create it as a standalone.
What I'm saying is perhaps just, and again, I'm not even saying we should do this, but if we wanna force council or force the authority to check in on itself to say, every 3 years, a memo shall be written to city council to evaluate
the
whether it
existence.
should be remain an authority or not, or convert to and again, I'm not saying qualitatively whether we should or shouldn't do that, but
Well, I
guess
think if
that's
we
the
do the
next
parallel thing, I mean, there might be 8 or 9 different changes to make that work right inside here, for example, and including under the dissolution portion, where it would just be fleshed out, but I think need to get the parallel question answered first before we start trying to flesh that out.
That section of annual reporting and oversight
Yeah.
speaks to, like, if there were a case where after this is happening annually, a decision to be discussed about whether dissolution is warranted. If you're reporting annually and all these things are happening, shouldn't that's the purview of council to make that determination at that point?
It's just whether or not we want to memorialize the intent of the pilot and say, and again, maybe we shouldn't, like, I don't, I'm just.
Doesn't 3 cover that? Cause you said if they're left with like 19 mortgages, but doesn't 3 take care of that by saying all outstanding obligations debts?
No, I mean, I'm sorry, I meant that in the exact reverse. There are mortgages owed to the authority
Okay,
that the city doesn't want to particularly
Okay.
collect, they just want to sell them.
gotcha.
They don't revert to the city, or the city may decide to have some sort of receiver that isn't the city.
That could be a part of that transition plan.
Yeah, it'd be like
Yeah.
3C.
No, I mean, like, do you want to be prescriptive to say what that plan is? Because right now, that transition plan can be anything. It could be selling the debt, it could be forgiving the debt,
Well, maybe I'm overemphasizing, the
Managing
revert to
the
the
debt.
city. I mean,
transferring the debt.
because it
to-
does kind of revert to the city. It may only revert to the city for 20 minutes because
I
they
guess,
plan. to
what
put
does
it somewhere
everybody
else.
think about
Yeah.
putting language in the ordinance about the pilot idea?
Can you give us pluses or minuses? You sound like you're kind of neutral on it. Can you give us pluses or minuses?
That's a good point. I guess the pros are that it reminds everybody about this discussion, because we notice how we forget discussion, so it reminds us to check in on having council evaluate the same sort of things we've been talking about, whether the pros and cons with the authority versus the nonprofit, and if the parallel nonprofit thing is working, then maybe we don't do anything. So the pro is just to memorialize the intent to check in on itself about whether this was the appropriate structure. The con is that it's an added, I don't know, thing that it has to do.
I like the idea of having some mechanism in there that's stronger than the annual reporting, that sort of, so that you don't get into a position where the authority gradually sort of becomes this neglected stepchild sort of thing, that, you know, okay, let's have an existential conversation periodically. Is this right?
Well, how long would be a pilot program though? Don't you have to define that?
Well,
That's what we're talking about.
actually, that's what we're
defining.
talking about.
Defining that in this section, okay.
3C,
So from time to time, the city council shall evaluate the efficacy of this program and decide whether to continue. or not.
Right.
Can we
No
just
less
add that
frequently
instead
than
of calling
every
it a
3
pilot
years.
program?
Sunshine?
I would give you both.
Well, I was just gonna ask Michael, if, has city council weighed in on whether, like, the idea of making it a pilot, has city council weighed in on that with Sam, or is that being driven by Sam? I'm just curious if city council has a position one way or the other about it being a pilot or not.
City council has a position.
Okay.
I mean, part of the discussion was maybe this is a pilot, it's just kind of like, part of the discussion was, is an authority provide starting, does it make it easier to start up and start building a portfolio versus a nonprofit? So the discussion of whether it may always be an authority, I think, is still ongoing. So maybe that is a pilot, but like pilot in the sense of like, maybe we try this for 3 years and then just decide like we're done with it.
Uh-huh,
Isn't really.
gotcha. I don't have a strong opinion.
So maybe that should go in the language that we're sending to Sam, say, look, let's see if I can remember what we were talking about 2 hours ago, but that we're very concerned that some of the elements of a nonprofit are not allowable under the authority given to an authority. And so it may be that we look at this thing as an authority for a period of time, but come back intentionally within 2 or 3 years or something like that to see if
But
the
we're
structure
gonna,
needs to
Antoine is
change.
gonna research though what,
Chesapeake.
Chesapeake, thank you, is doing before we say that, right?
I think what people, and I don't wanna put words in your mouth, I'm trying to sum up a little bit, I think what people wanna do is make sure that we memorialize the intent to go back and say, is this working, or is there a different structure?
Maybe you wanna go back.
I think I will feel much more comfortable hearing to the questions and all the things that Phil brought up, what Chesapeake is doing, how they're doing it, to see, and then, send our, you know, from that, send something to Sam about still what our concerns are.
Do you think this is something we can address when it comes back around? Is it gonna come back around?
To hack again?
Yeah.
This, like I said, I'm gonna take what you all send it to Sam. Imagine they're gonna have some maybe input and comments about questions or ideas or clarification or some engagement. Or I can request that they come talk to you guys, or however you wanna manage it. There will be another process. They're asking me to set the work plan after this. So if you wanna have another policy meeting, I could set the work plan around that. Like, I don't know.
And
Do you think
so,
we made a lot of changes that they're
We made
gonna,
some changes, but I don't think it's gonna be like, or you made recommendations. nothing
or,
changed.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Made some recommendations, but I don't think it adds time
Okay.
to the process. It's just a matter of, hey, when you all wanna hear back from the city manager's office and city attorney on these, if these are adopted or changed, incorporated, I imagine you want that version to see what it looks like.
I know.
Bring that back if it is, or if they say, no, let's proceed as it is, I'll send that back. Whatever the response is, I'm gonna share it back to you, and then you'll have that.
To your point, Nicole, under annual reporting and oversight, item number 4, community impact assessment, evaluating the effectiveness of the authority's activities in addressing housing needs. It could be easy to just include in there specific language about like outlining that it includes like analysis of the authority's legal structure and legal power. That, I don't know if that covers it, but because it could make sense to return to it. I mean, we did it with the police civilian oversight board in terms of them returning, evaluating whether they need like an additional staff position for like an auditor position, I think. So it's a little weird and clunky, but it's not like unprecedented to do that kind of thing, if that makes sense.
I think that would be a wise addition, and also will support the powers that the city has through Article 4 of the Virginia Code, which say at that time, you all, the council decides, or the recommendation is that, you know what, this would really function better as a standalone corporation. That's just really an amendment process of the ordinance, just without having to go through a dissolution and doing a public hearing again to set up a new one. And so that would be the time to have that interdiction, if you will, if it's required.
We're running out of time. I wanna try to adjourn us before 2 o'clock. 3 o'clock. I
think we're 30 minutes over.
Anything else in the proposal that people want to talk about? There's, all that's left are miscellaneous provisions.
Ability, that's nothing.
Boilerplate.
Effective date, compliance statement of laws.
Antoine, if I send
Yeah.
you comments, you want to send it to everyone?
No.
Great. Kathleen, member of the public, anything else to add? All right. There's nobody on. I think our business is concluded. We need a formal adjournment motion. I'll just pronounce us adjourned.
Oh, yeah, they would. Yeah, I'm not sure how interesting that story is gonna be for them, but. I don't know, she actually stayed for kind of a while, and then at one point we did kind of really start going back and forth about the income levels, so. She got some sort of a debate, I guess, but I saw that, that was huge, yeah, no, that, we were looking at the news, and I was like, wow, actually that, okay.
Rumor, but you.
Like-
Dollars.
I know, I was like, I don't